Namaskar to all. We are back here. So today is our final talk for this session, I think. So we stopped with a discussion on pranayama yesterday. So as I said earlier, I am trying to give more attention to the practical. Now the next step in Ashtanga, the 8 angas, is pratyahara. Now this is something we need to also look at very carefully. People usually skip pratyahara. They translate it generally as sense withdrawal. I think it's a wrong translation. Pratyahara basically is the capacity that the yogi develops, the practitioner develops over a period of time to be able to fix one's attention on something exclusively and also at any given moment switch it off and fix attention on something else. So that is why people call it sense withdrawal, because it is not actually that. It means to be able to give attention to something exclusively and switch it off when required and give attention to something else. So it is a withdrawal, but it is also a refixing of attention. So this is pratyahara. It means the yogi develops the practice, through practice, the capacity to filter and take only what he wants and discard everything else. It is a I would say ahara, and only that which is necessary. So for instance, this is also a very useful thing even in daily life. A yogi is not one who meditates when he is driving. You know what will happen if you meditate when you are driving, especially with closed eyes. And also, suppose you go into a samadhi or trance, what will happen not only to you but also to the poor people on the road. So a yogi is one who, when he is driving or she is driving, is completely attentive of the activity that he is engaged in, which is driving. That engagement in that act itself is attention, which can graduate into dharana, dhyana and samadhi. I mean, the practice by which you train the mind to be totally absorbed in whatever it's doing, one pointedly. So that when that happens, it's already a form of meditation. In daily life, when you are driving, when you are running, when we are playing badminton, or when you are playing golf or whatever, that one pointed attention should not shift. When you want, you should be able to switch it off and shift to what you want to shift, or just relax. This capacity has to be developed gradually. It does not come in a day or two. Regarding this, I am going to tell you a story, small story, it won't take much time. Do you know the name of the founder of Zen Buddhism? And the Japanese have a system called Zen, and you must have heard about the Zen koans. They are sentences which have so many meanings to them. The Zen koans. The Sufis also have their own concept of this, and then of course the Dzogchen Buddhists in the Mahayana system. Anyway, so actually the Zen teachings went from the south of India. There was a great Buddhist yogi and monk from southern state of Tanjore in Tamil Nadu, who later on, after becoming a Buddhist, acquired the name of Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma traveled all over India and then went to China. And he taught a particular brand of Buddhism, which laid great stress on practical meditation rather than too much of theory. Practical meditation. So he called his brand of Buddhism dhyana Buddhism, dhyana, meditation. Now, then he went to China and used to live in a hermitage. I don't know which part of China, high up on the hills. And when it went to China, the word dhyan in Sanskrit became chan in Chinese, chan. Now, chan, when it went to Japan later, much after Bodhidharma, became Zen. Chan, the Japanese language is quite guttural, so it became Jan, then Zen. So this is the origin of Zen, Dhyan. And in India, generally if you say, I want to do dhyana, people will say, oh, that is homegrown, not so good. If you say, I am practicing Zen, then it's very interesting, you know. We have this problem, always. I told you the other day how Ramakrishna Paramahamsa told somebody, this guy, he wants to read the Gita. He thinks the Gita is a good book. Some Angrez must have told him it's a good book, you know. So, in my native state, in Kerala, we have a saying in Malayalam, Muttatte mullekku manamilla. That means the jasmine that grows in your own garden doesn't have much smell. The other fellow's garden, it smells good. In the same way, with Zen, it's something imported, you know, from exotic. Anyway, this is the origin of Zen, it is Dhyan. Now, when Bodhidharma, I don't know if you have seen any portraits of Bodhidharma, he looks quite a dangerous guy. He has a moustache like that. Like in South, in Tamil Nadu, many people have that kind of, and he's a huge built man with kind of a angry look on his face. We have only portraits, there are no photographs. So once when Bodhidharma was staying in China, on the top of a hill, two students who were looking for Bodhidharma, finally after wandering for 3 days or so reached the top of the hill. You know, those days there is no internet, no Google Maps, no advertisements, no nothing. So they took a long time, hungry, with torn clothes, searching, and finally they reached the top of the hill. When they reached the top of the hill, Bodhidharma, it was lunch time, 1 meal a day principle. And he was sitting and having his soup. You know, they have wooden bowls and wooden spoons. So these people went to him, they prostrated before him. He was drinking. And they said to him, sir, we have come from a very far place. We have not had enough food. We have been wandering for 3 days. Finally, we found you. The reason why we came is because we want to learn Zen. Please teach us Zen. And teach us how to attain Satori. Now, Satori is the word they use in Zen instead of Nirvana, or Moksha, Kaivalya, and so on, Satori. No answer. After 2 minutes, he turned and looked at them and he said, I am drinking my soup. So they waited. Again he is going on drinking his soup slowly. So they asked again, same answer, I am drinking my soup. Third time when they asked him, he called an assistant and said, give them their soup. So two of them ended up holding a bowl, drinking the soup. And it suddenly occurred to them, how silly is this? We want to learn Zen and we end up drinking soup. So they put the soup bowls down and asked him again, we want to please teach us Zen. Then he said, but I am drinking my soup. So they got very upset. So they said, we are also drinking our soup. Then he stopped. By the time he had finished his soup, so he stopped and he said, no, you are not drinking your soup. You are drinking your soup and you are thinking of Zen. Two things. While I am drinking my soup, I am drinking my soup, I am drinking my soup. This is Zen. Get what it is? Pratyahara. When you do one thing, you're doing only that thing. You're not doing anything else. The mind is not distracted. We are accustomed to this. We are doing something, the mind is going somewhere else. So, but it's clear that it comes through practice. We can do it. If one person can do it, other person, unless he has some special genes from the aliens, which is very rare, but it's possible to do it. We all have some genes, I think, from somewhere, which are dormant and which can be activated. Anyway, that's a different controversial subject. Let's not enter into that. So, now how is this possible to practice? One is by doing whatever you are doing with complete attention, as we discussed. The other is also through the practice of what came just before pratyahara, that is pranayama. When you see, the mind is generally always distracted, generally. It's like you think of one thought and in 2 minutes it has jumped to something else. And soon, in a second, it has gone somewhere else. It goes on like a chain. You have no control over this, generally. In fact, the great James Joyce wrote a complete novel, which he, using the technique called the stream of consciousness, Ulysses. I have not managed to read more than 2 pages of this book. It's called stream of consciousness. Our mind is such that it thinks of one thing, then connects, and before you know it, you thought of a book and in seconds you are thinking of England, because you might have seen the book. It just connects at random. So therefore, when I sit down to meditate, the idea is to meditate, gather your energies and make them travel through a particular path or a particular area or a particular direction, in a particular direction. So when I sit down, what happens? The mind is going here, because the mind cannot stay in a vacuum. And it is tremendous power if it can be fitted in there, but it can't stay in a vacuum. It's like nature. Nature also cannot stay in a vacuum. If you have a vacuum, the air always rushes in to fill it. This is physical science. You can't you have a vacuum, the air is always rushing in. Vacuum is, nature abhors a vacuum actually. So the mind is not in a state of, it's always moving. Vrittis are always moving in the mind. Now, is there a way to reduce the vrittis, reduce the distractions, at least to bring it down to maybe the level of from 10 to say 3, 4, 2? Yes, and that is pranayama. Why? The mind hates to remain without being absorbed in something. It can't remain quiet. It can't remain in an empty. If you think I am going to sit quietly, some other thoughts will come. Nice thoughts maybe, but they will come in. Because the mind cannot sit empty. It has to fill. The science of pranayama combined with pratyahara says that the only way to reduce this distraction is to engage the mind in something instead of trying to take it away from something. Now, if you engaged it in something outside, then more distractions will be created. So, the idea is, can we engage it in something inside? Now, there are different ways of doing it. This will take us to the next step, dharana, but let us go through this properly. The most important thing here is that you should engage your mind internally to avoid it from being distracted externally in something which does not have any connotations of things which are outside, which are not in any impressions of things which are outside, which are known by the senses. So, there is only one thing that we can fix your attention on. You cannot hear the circulation of blood, so you cannot fix your attention internally on the circulation. Even the beating of the heart generally you do not hear, otherwise it would have been good to fix your attention there, so that there are no outward distractions, the mind is caught up in some internal action. Now, not being able to do that, one thing everybody can do is to fix the mind, fix the attention on your breath. This we can do. So, now what is happening? Internally when I breathe in, it is also part of vipassana of course in some way. When I breathe in, normally we are not aware at all of our breathing. I become aware. I say, let me be aware of my breathing in, inhalation. I am breathing in, and then maybe I am holding for a second or maybe not, and then I am exhaling. My attention is completely there in the inhalation and the exhalation. So, what happens? There is no space now in the mind to bring anything from the outside world, because it is already engaged in something, and what it is engaged in has no connection with that which is outside. Here also there is a danger. Find a spot where there is good air, clear air, and there is no bad smells coming, otherwise that could be a distraction. Even a good smell or bad smell could be a distraction. So, stay in a place with a lot of plenty of trees, nice, and then sit down and breathe in complete attention. Then what happens? The mind becomes still, because it is now engaged in one activity, which is the breathing, nothing else. All other things are out. When this continues for a length of time, then you begin to feel calm, quiet, tranquil. In that tranquility, there is one pointed attention. Now, here this one pointed attention is on the breath. When you practice for a long time one pointed attention on the breath, you can also then shift the one pointed attention on the different centers called the chakras. In the beginning, if you try, you will get distractions, it will go away. But when you become a master of your breath, where you can at any given moment switch off and say, I am just aware of my breath going in and coming. After some time, the mind you will feel has calmed down and tranquil, and there is a pleasant feeling inside. That is the time when you can shift your mind from the Muladhara to the Sahasrara, we discussed yesterday, in the different centers, and hold it there. Now, even when you hold it there, if it moves, if it tries to move, start doing the breathing in and breathing out with attention on that center. You are breathing in, suppose for example, on the Manipura or the heart center. I think my breath is going into the heart. Attention here, it is coming out from here. When this is done, then I have now fixed my attention on Anahat, starting with fixing my attention on the breath. The mind is engaged in something inside, therefore it is not distracted by what is outside. When this one pointed attention happens, then it is called Dharana. The last three angas of Ashtanga, Dharana. Now, once you become an expert in Dharana, this Dharana can be also used for the outside world. When you are working or reading or writing, you can put your complete attention on what you are doing, no matter what is going on around. But it takes practice. Abhyasa, Nairantariya Abhyasena is from the Yoga Sutras. Constant practice brings perfection. Why? Because the mind is already in some mold from childhood. We need to remove it from that mold. So, therefore, we need to refix it in one mold, so that it is out of the other, and in the end you can break the mold, but not before that. In the end, yes, finally in samadhi, there are no shapes, there are no molds, nothing. Because if you don't break the mold, you cannot see the image which is inside. It is always stuck inside. But in the beginning, one needs to have a shape and a form. A mold is required. For example, I will come to the measuring of this later, but suppose there is a good dancer. You say the dancer is very good because she is also an expert and she is innovating. Now, before she begins to innovate, she has to master the techniques of dance, classical. She has to master every little thing which is part of dance. And when she has mastered it, then she can innovate. What will a person who has no knowledge of dance at all innovate? How can you innovate? For innovating, you need something first, right? From there you innovate. So, therefore, the mind should first learn to fix itself internally. When it learns to be aware and give one pointed attention to the breath, then it can be used to give one pointed attention to your inner feelings, your inner chakras, your centers, and so on and so forth. Now again, since we were discussing for so many days, I think when somebody is doing pranayam, the best posture to do pranayam is Padmasana. But if you cannot do Padmasana, you can sit normally in siddhasana or swastikasana or even just folded legs, which in India it's not so difficult for people. Many of us sit with folded legs, which is called sukhasana. So you sit in sukhasana, best posture for pranayam. Breathe in and out. Now the same thing which I said, the ECG, the EEG and the scans, whatever, these can be fixed to wherever they need to be fixed, I don't know exactly where. And while the practice is going on, you should see the graph. Is there a change? What is happening there? I bet there is a change. There is. You need to just check and figure out. But there is, it won't be like a normal graph. There will be a change in the graph. So this is one way we can see what happens to the mind when one is doing pranayam, and from pranayam moving towards what is known as dharana. Now from this one pointed of dharana, one pointedness of dharana, when it continues for a length of time, in the beginning it's possible only for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. If it continues for a long time, it needs to continue for a long time, then that dharana itself has now become dhyana. Now again, dhyana is loosely translated as meditation, but in the yogic terminology there is no such word called meditation. There is dharana, dhyana and samadhi put together is what we mean in English by meditation. Okay. So when this continues for a length of time, then one is absorbed only in that which one is fixed one's attention on, and there are no other distractions. When the mind becomes free of distractions, then it also becomes free of modifications. And the mind is in its original state with no modification. It may take time, it may not happen in one day. When it is in that state where there are no modifications, then the pure consciousness which gives the mind the capacity to be aware alone remains, nothing else is there. There is only that consciousness. Consciousness with no distractions, consciousness in its original form, not form, in its original state. This is manifested when the mind is free of all distractions through dharana, dhyana. So the word samadhi means there are no distractions of the mind at all. no modification, the mind is not wanting to become something or get out of something it was before, it is in his natural state. In that natural state, the Purusha is understood, realized. Purusha here means not a male, Purusha means consciousness. Purusha Prakriti doesn't mean male, female, it means the essence of consciousness. Even in a woman, when that stage is reached, it is called Purusha, it is not called Prakriti. It's a Sankhya word from the Sankhya Darsana. Now this is the aim of the yogi to finally. Now in Samadhi also there are different layers. There is Savikalpa Samadhi, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and so on. There are many variations. Now Nirvikalpa means the pure state when there is no modification at all. Savikalpa means it's a temporary state where there are no modifications, but when the mind comes out of it, there are still modifications existing. But an expert can go in and remain without modification for some time and come out. In Nirvikalpa, the mind has now attained a permanent release from these modifications. It can still function in this world, but it has lost all its modifications, and there is not even the seed, no vikalpa, not even the seed of a vikalpa existing in that mind. Such a person is supposed to have attained Nirvikalpa Samadhi. You can call it Nirvana, you can call it Sahaja Samadhi, you can call it Moksha, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so now we have made a jump. We came from Yamaniyama, we came to Sadhanapada, and then from there we jumped straight to Kaivalya. There is one chapter in between which is called the Vibhuti Pada. Before the final freedom, before the final loss of all modifications, when the mind becomes from gross to subtle, it is not completely subsided, but has become gross to subtle. In that subtle state, the yogi begins to experience various capacities which normal human beings do not have. Of them, the most important is he is able to mold his mind or her mind in whatever way he or she wants to. And also, we believe that when the mind becomes that powerful, it also changes biologically the cell structures. Now this again is open to discussion, it is open to experiment. Yesterday we discussed Gopi Krishna, who also said there is a change happening also in the brain cells. The brain cells are no longer the same as it were before, there is something happened there. A mutation has taken place, and these are all stepping stones to that mutation. I am talking in biological terms. So, Vibhuti Pada describes various capacities developed by the yogi. Now, these also can be experimentally checked. Here are the Vibhutis, some of the Vibhutis. The capacity to distinguish, this is Sutra 17 of Vibhuti Pada of Yoga Sutras. The capacity to distinguish between the meaning of words and their various nuances and meanings comes through samyama. Samyama simply means dharana, dhyana and samadhi. The yogi, you can't mislead an yogi very easily because he sees through your words. Now this is an interesting discussion because usually we say words without meaning what we are saying. Very commonly we say good morning. The morning may be terrible, but it becomes a mechanical word and it has acquired its own meaning. So the word has acquired a meaning which originally does not exist. So the yogi can see the word as separate, vak, and the meaning behind it. Also, one might have a pleasant expression, but one might be inside well agitated. We all travel by air. The wonderful smiles that stewardess has is artificial. There is nothing. They are taught to smile. Nothing wrong, better than frowning, but they're really not smiling because they're happy to see you. You see them after they finish serving your food, when they're together, they're saying, oh God, it's over now. So the yogi develops the capacity, his mind becomes so sharp that he can distinguish between pretension and reality. This is a siddhi, this is a vibhuti. Everybody doesn't possess this. Why does this happen? Because the mind is free of modifications, and therefore it becomes sharp and penetrating and can see things as they are, as opposed to as they are presented. Now, even in a Guru-Shishya relationship, this is very important, because if a teacher has progressed in yoga and has one of these vibhutis, as in Sutra 17, he knows where the student is. Even the student can pretend to be anything, but he knows exactly where he is. So, I am just describing one of the extraordinary capacities that happens when the mind begins to go deeper and deeper and lose its modifications. Why? Because it is going closer to the ultimate consciousness. And therefore the capacity to think, the capacity to see, everything improves. Also, here is another Vibhuti, Sutra 18 from Vibhuti Pada. From perceiving the samskaras, one's attitudes and tendencies, samskara sakshat karanat purvajati jnanam samskara. So, from perceiving the samskaras, one's attitudes and tendencies, not others, for myself, not for others, not reading somebody else's character, myself, one can come to an understanding of previous births. How? Oh, look, this is interesting. Two children are born in the same family, let's say 2, 3. They get almost the same kind of food, same roughly. But all three of them have tendencies which may be different from each other. One may be very studious, one may be very lazy, one may be interested in music, the other may hate music, may tell his brother, shut that up, I don't want to hear. So, if a yogi has developed this penetrating capacity of looking at realities rather than what they appear to be, then by looking at one's own samskaras, one can trace back to one's previous births. This is one of the vibhutis described. This is on condition that you believe in past birth. I mean, I am just speculating. Suppose there are past births. Well, I do believe in it. It's my experience. I can't put it in a test tube, unfortunately. I wish there was some gadget by which you can look at past birth, photograph it and put it forward. It doesn't work. We are working on a different thing altogether, not a physical object. What they are trying to say is, when dharana and dhyana become perfect, then the mind becomes without distractions and modifications, not influenced by any modifications. It becomes sharp and insightful, and therefore looking at the samskaras that we have, the traits of character we have, we can kind of trace back our past and say, how is this possible? Perhaps I had something to do with music in my past birth. Then I contemplate on it. Gradually, the mind goes backwards into its essence from where it started. And then you know, yes, I was a disciple of Tyagaraja Swami or something like that. So, this is what they mean. So, what they are trying to say is, apart from reaching the highest level of consciousness, as the mind becomes quiet and calm and tranquil, it develops energy and capacities which are beyond the ordinary, which may be useful for all of us in some way. The only problem is usually when this happens we get so caught up with it that we refuse to go beyond. We are stuck there. Suppose I have the capacity, let's say, to you come to me and I look at you and I say, hey, you have come for this. Then you say, how did you know? Then it becomes, then you go and tell somebody, third party, fourth party. Soon people are coming saying, oh, this man knows what is happening in our mind. Finished. Then you are done. You won't go beyond that. You are stuck there. Unless one feels, okay, this is not the end. It's like you're traveling in a train from, I'm not using the word plane because in a plane you can't get off on the way anyway. So you're traveling from, say, Delhi to Haridwar in a train. Now nice trains are available. Takes I think 4.5 hours or something. Shatabdis are there. You're traveling. On the way the train stops in another station and you get down. There is a shop in the station which has something very attractive for you. You get down. You are so caught up by it, you forget that there are only 2 minutes stop. Train is gone before you run back. You're stuck with that little toy or whatever you want to buy and you're there. You have to get another train. So your journey has ended. You have to restart your journey again. Lucky if your bag is not inside, left. So what the yogi is trying to do is to reach the highest state of superconsciousness, to find out, to understand that at the highest level I am no different from that consciousness, which in yogic terminology is called Purusha. And while I am attempting that, the mind becomes one-pointed, subtle, clear and full of energy because no energy is being distracted. So then certain extraordinary capacities develop in me. But the danger is, while it is useful in many cases, the danger is that it can distract one and stop you from moving further into the beyond. That is there. However, this capacity for creativity happens when the mind is quiet, without distract, also when there is tremendous energy, because the energy is not being wasted by the vrittis that appear in the mind stuff. Everything is quiet. So you gather a lot of energy. You also get extraordinary courage because you are very close to the understanding that you are not this body. The body can be hurt, but that which is inside cannot be. The virus can attack the body, but it can't attack the soul. So, and if you can tap that energy, then it can also possibly translate itself into extraordinary capacity for the human body also, because the body is made up of cells, and cells according to the ancients is also originally made up of consciousness. The Sutra 19 says something very dangerous. It says, from the capacity to see clearly that comes through the practice of Dharana, dhyana and samadhi, one sees others' intentions and the knowledge of others' minds. Now this also should be experimented, I would say. Keep a group of people in front, sit down and meditate and say, what is this guy thinking now? So, anyway. Now here is another thing which I have personally experienced, but which I do not have the capacity to do myself. I have tried a couple of times, but it just doesn't work. May have worked some occasion, rarely, but it doesn't work. This is something, it's the Sutra 21 of Vibhuti Pada of Yoga Sutras of Patanjali says, from samyama, which means dharana, dhyana, samadhi, comes the capacity to prevent the light rays falling on the form of the body from being reflected to the eye of the beholder, and hence the form is concealed. It's not as if the form has disappeared, the form is still here. I don't know whether, can I tell you a little? It is a very illustrative. It's my experience. I tried, but it doesn't work so much. I'm not such a great yogi. But Maheswarnath Babaji, my guru, was a great yogi. I have no doubt. And he hated to be photographed. Never. I have tried many times, but I don't want to go into that. But it didn't work, so it failed. So let's leave it there. So when it failed, he sat down on the banks of the Ganga and gave me a small lecture on photography. He said, "So, how do you think photography works? What happens?" So I said, "Well, the objects falls on those days only film photography. We didn't have digital. So the image falls on the film, and then it gets registered. Okay." So he says, "So how does the image fall there?" Image falls because the light falls on the image and reflects back, and the light that falls on the image and reflects back is what goes into the lens, and then the small image forms on the screen, on the film. Okay, agreed. Then he says, what if somebody has the capacity to absorb all the light and not allow the light to go back? Will you get a photograph? I said, but I have not thought about that at all. I mean, this is impossible almost to, how can we consciously absorb the light and not allow it to reflect back? If it doesn't reflect back, you won't see me now on the screen. Nothing will be there where I am sitting. Maybe you see a dark silhouette, perhaps. So I said, Baba ji, ये तो बड़ी मुश्किल की बात है, इसके बारे में सोच. I said, I can't think. This is, what I mean to say is, I think you are talking something. Even though I knew about his capacities, I was young, 21 years old. What I said, expression was that it's like saying you're talking through your hat. Now, please, how can, for a split second, now you can only believe me, you cannot, there is no other proof. For a split second, there was nobody there. So, again, somebody came back. Immediately, it was like a flash. And there was no one there. There is no image. And then in a split second, the image is back. And I am thinking maybe I had a blackout. I was a very skeptical guy. I thought maybe I had a blackout. So he laughed and he said, you will not believe even if you see, forget it. So we went on to something else. So such things are possible, and perhaps now we should move on from belief to experimentation. It's time. It's time to do that. We need to keep an object, if we can't do it ourselves, and see there is some way that the light rays falling on it are not reflected back. Is there a magnetic way or an electromagnetic way of preventing this happening? All I am doing is putting forth certain ideas which may be worked upon and perhaps at some point understood. I am proud that they have come from this great tradition of ours, ancient traditions that we have in this country, but they need now to go to the labs. Times have changed. We should stop living only in the frontal lobe civilization and begin to explore into other unexplored parts of the brain which have remained dormant for so long they have almost become like wastage organs. No work, nothing is happening, rusted. We are saying that they can be revived. I'll close this because there are many other things like becoming light in body and so on. The Yoga Sutra says that the Vibhuti of becoming light is like you sit down and meditate and identify yourself with a wisp of cotton floating in the air, and your body also can become light. This is what they are saying. Is there a way to test? Yes. Get a yogi to sit on a weighing machine, very sensitive weighing machine. where even little bit change can be noticed, not those heavy ones in railway stations. And then ask him to meditate and fully give attention, that visualize that he is a wisp of cotton floating in the air, and see if there is a change in the weight. You can also measure his oxygen intake at that time, how much oxygen is going in, how much carbon dioxide is coming out. Is nitric oxide building up in the nostrils, which is very useful for us now. As I explained to you on the first day of this session, that if you practice Brahmari regularly, you can build nitric oxide in your sinuses and your nasal passages, which is a great deterrent to invading viruses of all kinds. And right now we are dealing only with this virus, COVID-19. According to biologists, many biologists, viruses are older than single cellular organisms. They might have existed even before the amoeba. So they are ancient, they are not anything new. New strains happen, but they are already in existence. So even if this particular wave moves off, you can expect in this world new waves will keep coming sometime or the other. I hope people remember there was a Spanish flu which took 30 million lives, much more than two world wars put together. The Spanish flu, and it lasted for 4 years because people didn't know how to handle it. Now at least we know how to handle it. And I think all these yogic and yoga tantras should be experimentally tried out to make sure that we are safe from all these things. Okay, so we have come from yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana and samadhi. These are the ashtangas. Now the only thing is, these have to be while being practiced individually. They also need to be tested out in scientific ways, so that the claims that we find in the text may be proved or disproved. It's okay if you disprove it. I think they will be proved, but one can try, and if you don't get the result, you can say, okay, doesn't work, which doesn't mean everything doesn't work. Some may work, some may not work. The experimental instruments may be defective also. We have to watch that also. And the guy who does that may not be a yogi, so nothing is happening. This is also possible. There are various factors. So, on this note, we can close this session. We are open to questions for some time. If there are any questions, we can discuss them.
तो सर मेरा ये प्रश्न था, जैसे कल आपने थोड़ा गायत्री मंत्र के बारे में बताया था
जी,
तो हाँ, हमने और हमारे एक सुपरवाइजर सर हैं
जी,
तो हम लोग ने मिलकर कुछ गायत्री साधकों का इंटरव्यू लिया था।
अच्छा,
तो हाँ, वो मध्यम वर्गीय साधक हैं
जी,
जो लोग अपनी जॉब के साथ साथ गायत्री साधना।
जी, जी, जी।
तो उन्होंने एक चीजों पे बहुत एम्फेसिस किया था कि दीक्षा इज वेरी नेसेसरी, दीक्षा इज वेरी नेसेसरी। तो मैं ये जानना चाहता हूँ कि क्या यदि कोई नो वॉइस पर्सन है, मान लीजिए अमेरिकन है या कहीं बाहर का पर्सन है, and he is not taking diksha, and if he chants Gayatri mantra with the same methodology or vidhi, then doesn't it affect, और मतलब उसका क्या रोल है, मैं जानना चाहता हूँ थोड़ा आध्यात्मिक पर्सपेक्टिव से आपके माध्यम से।
Can I speak in English?
Yes sir, yes sir.
ऐसा है, sorry. So it's like this. I'll mix up both anyway, doesn't matter. Since you have talked in Hindi, it's getting into my head. So, गायत्री मंत्र है, ओके। तो हाँ, तो उसमें ओम प्रणव एक पहले, भूर भुवा स्वा, स्वाहा नहीं है, स्वा। प्लीज अंडरस्टैंड that when many people say Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha, there is no Swaha out there. Om Bhur Bhuva Swa, which means Bhuloka, Bhurloka, Swargaloka. Other lokas are not expressed. Janaloka, Tapaloka is okay. Bhur Bhuva Swa. Then the next line is Tat Savitr Varenyam. I worship that Savitr, the sun, the light, the controller. Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, I meditate upon that effulgent being. Bhargo Devasya, effulgent Deva, Dhimahi, I meditate upon. Diyo Yona Prachodayat, illumine my intelligence, stimulate my intelligence. Ordinary as well as the inner intelligence, stimulated. Now this is the Gayatri. Now if you understood the meaning of it, well, we need a long session for the, anyway, if you understood roughly what it means, that I bow down to the Supreme Being, the effulgent being, ask him and request that my intelligence be stimulated and allowed to expand. Now this is the prayer of the Gayatri. However, the first line Bhur Bhuva Swa is added on the beginning. It means, may this stimulation of my inner being, of my intelligence, take place in the waking state, in the dream state, and also in deep sleep. Bhu is Bhuloka is Jagrata, Bhuva is dream, and Swa is Swarga, the best Swarga that ordinary human beings experience is deep sleep, Sushupti. So, in all these three states, may my intelligence be stimulated, so that I can finally touch that which is beyond, that is Priya. When I realize that I am myself, Soham Hamsa, I am that being who I worship. Now this is the mantra. While the meaning is this, the mantra is also set in a certain way so that the sound also has an effect. Even if you don't know the meaning, if you chant it according to the Rigvedic Chandas, it comes from the Rigveda. Vishwamitra is the Rishi who gave us this mantra. So, while it appears in the Rigveda, it has a certain chandas, the way of saying, and that is so important that it has been called the Gayatri Chandas. It is not a song. Please don't sing the Gayatri. We will come back to whether initiation and so on, but please, a few, not restrictions, precautions. Don't sing the Gayatri. Gayatri is not a song. Especially don't fix it for your reverse gear in the car. When you are reversing, Om Bhur Bhuva. So Gayatri is a mantra, it's not for singing. Nowadays this Gayatri is sung, I hear it everywhere with drums and all kinds of things. In its purity is lost by this singing. It's not a song. Gayatri is a mantra to be chanted. Okay. When the Gayatri is chanted, it has a certain effect not only on you, but also on people who are sitting around. All the living beings and non-living objects around are affected by the sound of the Gayatri, and the simple chanting which is already there in the chandas should be used, then it becomes more effective. Now to the question of whether one should be initiated into the Gayatri, I would say it would work better if someone initiates you. Unfortunately, nowadays initiation has become like a mechanical act. I whisper it into your ear and it's over. The person who is initiating you into the Gayatri should be a person who has chanted Gayatri since childhood for many years and developed the siddhi of Gayatri. Then when initiation is given, it's like a seed being planted into your mind and it does its own work. Otherwise, simply if somebody knows Gayatri and he gives you the Gayatri and says, I have initiated you, it's not that important. Someone should have done the Gayatri and acquired the siddhi of the Gayatri, and then when he gives the Gayatri or she gives the Gayatri, I think women also can say, when it is given, then the seed is also planted, the bija is planted inside, and from the bija sprouts the energy. So in a way, they are right to say that you have to be initiated, but even if you are not initiated, if you use the correct pronunciation and do it, it may still give you the advantage that is intended. I have, unfortunately or fortunately, I have on the YouTube chanting of Gayatri, so you can check.
Yes, sir, I have heard your
Yes, you have.
chants and also in your lectures. So, sir, one more question. That by chanting of Gayatri Mantra, I feel that my left nostril becomes more dominant than the right one. And उससे मतलब मुझे ऐसा फील होता है कि उसके बाद भी लेफ्ट नॉस्ट्रिल becomes slighter more dominant than the right one. Does left nostril and right nostril has any effect with the mantra or correlation with mantra?
Now I need to tell you this. When traditionally the Gayatri is chanted, it's called Sandhya Vandana. And when the Sandhya Vandana is done, there are many rituals that are done before you start the chanting. And one of them is the breathing exercise called Anulom Vilom. If you see an orthodox person sitting down and doing Sandhya Vandana, couple of things he does. One of the things he does is to hold the nostrils like this and breathe in through the left, hold it for a while, breathe out to the right, breathe in again, hold, breathe out. Now this is called Anulom Vilom. This is done at least for a few seconds, at least for a minute or two, to balance the Ida and Pingala, the left and right nostrils, so that when you chant the Gayatri, both are working equally. So my suggestion is, before you chant the Gayatri, if you don't want only the left to be open, the Ida, because our aim is that the Sushumna should open, so both should be equal, do your Anulom Vilom. Breathe in and breathe out to the left and right nostrils for at least a minute or 2 minutes, and then start chanting the Gayatri. Then check for yourself if it's neutral. You can find out. Experiment and see. Anyway, there is no harm if your left nostril is working after the chanting, there is no harm. There is also no harm if only the right nostril is working. Let me tell you this, according to the Swara Abhyasa, Swara Vidya as they call it, Swara here meaning the breath, Shwasa. The right nostril, which is called the Pingala, when the air moves through the Pingala, actually when air moves through the Pingala, it is moving through the left side, and when you do the left, it is working through the right. That's okay, don't get confused. When the air is going in through the right nostril, through the Pingala, and when the left is not working so much, even normally we tend to think that both nostrils are working at the same time equally. They are not. How do you know? Because if you have a piece of glass or something held under your nostrils, and if you breathe into it, you will get two blobs of vapor on it. Just now I did on my cell phone screen. You know what happened? The left side has a bigger blob than the right. It's because when I'm sitting and talking and studying, explaining, I like to keep the left functioning. So I already did that adjustment, which is why. But even in normal terms, even though we think both work equally, they don't. One works more than the other, which you will know from the bigger blob of vapor that comes. Now, if there is more working on the pingala, yogis say that is the best time for all physical activity. Eating, drink, this should be experimented again. I know it works for me, but eating, drinking, bathing, exercise, walking, setting out on a journey, sex, all these are work to the optimum when your right nostril is on, when it is more here than the left. And it happens automatically sometimes. In most cases, it happens automatically. If it doesn't, then the yogi says, shut the other nostril and breathe a few times and it will restore itself. When the left is open, ida is open, and the pingala is not working so much, it is open of course, but not working so much, then the activity is best performed during this time is teaching, thinking, experimenting, scientific experiment, music, reading, painting, all these activities which are not exactly physical. So, there is no harm if your left is working more than the right for some time after chanting the Gayatri, but remember that these are the things which you might be able to do at optimum level than the other. So, yogic practice has a certain technique by which you can shift when you want. Now that you know which is useful when you are doing a particular activity, you can, if it is not that, you can shift by finding out which one is working more. Very simple. If you lie down on your left side, actually lie down, in about a minute your right will be working fully, optimum level, opposite side. Suppose you lie down on your right for some time, in a minute, automatic, unless you have sinus and some cold, then you need to do other things, but left will start working, optimum level instead of the right. So, depending upon your activity, you can shift it. Only thing is when you are traveling, you won't be able to lie down, but this is one of the techniques. The other technique is to close the other nostril and just breathe through one till it becomes steady. But to go to a state of spiritual trance, which is called samadhi, and which is the essence of consciousness, then both of them should be working equally, because then the Sushumna is open. The central channel is open, which is why Anulom Vilom is done many times so that both the nostrils are clear and the Ida and Pingala get balanced, then the Sushumna starts working and taking you to beyond ordinary things of the world. What we discussed was ordinary things of the world, eating, drinking, listening to music. Suppose you want to go to the realms which are pure consciousness, then the Sushumna is important. For the Sushumna to function properly, the Ida and the Pingala should be working equally.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, one more question.
Yes, please.
That in Kaivalyapad, chapter 4, the first mantra says, Janma Aushadhi Mantra Tapa Samadhi Ja Siddhaya.
Yes.
Means, from this slok, I want to know that can mantra lead to Samadhi state?
I didn't get my glasses, but Janma aushadhi mantra tapah samadhi yaha siddhaya, right? Siddhis or vibhutis manifest due to janma, birth, aushadhi, drugs, mantra, chanting of mantras, austerity, which means tough life, almost the body is not allowed to behave as it wants, but you mold the body's and mind's behavior, and or samadhi. Samadhi is a state of mind which is outside the ordinary, beyond the ordinary. So what is your question?
Can mantra japa leads to the highest state of kaivalya or samadhi?
No. Here what is discussed is not kaivalya but siddhis, vibhutis. Even, this is very interesting that even though this is kaivalya pada, the first sloka links to the previous chapter which is Vibhuti. It doesn't link to Kaivalya. It says Siddhi. Now one second. The highest Siddhi is supposed to be Kaivalya. People say Siddha. When you say Siddha, it could be someone who has some extraordinary capacity. Okay. He might read your mind, or he might look at a person at first sight and say, well, when I last saw this person, the hair was grey, now it is dark. Maybe died, who knows. So, the capacity of a person improves and becomes sharp. I have nothing against dyeing the hair, I don't, because dyeing could mean dying also. Then, so what I am trying to say is that the highest siddhi, siddhi means what? Extraordinary capacity. That is a siddhi. The highest siddhi is to attain the highest level of consciousness, to reach that which is beyond conditioning. So, in that sense, yes, mantra can gradually lead you to that siddhi, which is samadhi, from samadhi into kaivalya. True. But here the reference is also to the other extraordinary capacities developed in a human being. Also, don't forget, aushadhi also has been mentioned. Only thing is that part, aushadha or drugs, when you say drugs, not in a bad way, as an additional support for the yogi, some chemical interventions, these also are possible, but they won't take you to samadhi, which is the highest siddhi. They will also give you some extraordinary capacities. Heightened, for instance, amphetamine or one of these things when taken, modern, it gives heightened perceptions. True, because it affects that part of the nervous system which increases your perceptions. Temporary, of course, it will go off after a while. So, to your question whether mantra, yes and no. Yes, because it can give you a certain extraordinary capacity. If by that you mean highest state of Kaivalya Samadhi, this is also possible through the mantra, but then that the mode of chanting and the way you go about it is slightly different from what you would do if you want another siddhi. Even singing of a name can take you to Samadhi. There is an Upanishad, minor Upanishad, which is called the Kalisantara Upanishad, where the Rishi says we can't, in this Kali Yuga, it's so difficult to do yoga, this, that, Vedanta, Jnana, and all this, and also life is short. So they have mentioned that you just chant this mantra continuously and probably you will then raise your spiritual awareness step by step and reach there. And the mantra mentioned is Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of course, turned the order around and put Krishna first. In the Kalisantara Upanishad, there is Rama first, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, Now you can't call this a mantra, but you can also call it a maha mantra because it takes you from the awareness of the world to the awareness of the divine being. Now this particular mantra which I said need not necessarily give you any siddhis, but it can increase, it can step up the mind's sensibilities and take you to a spiritual realm. This is possible.
Thank you, sir, for answering beautifully all the questions. Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, sir. You told the story of Haridwar to Delhi to Haridwar train story. My experience is related to that. So, sir, when our all gross sensations get converted into subtle sensations throughout the body, and particularly in that state, sometimes I feel extremely beautiful experiences. So, it takes so long, come back from that state to the normal state, the circular state from what I do. So, sir, what you suggest me to so that I can come back because I don't know the duration. I experience the state because I now I can predict that also. So, sir, can you suggest me something so that
To
it will
come
be
back.
helpful for me?
To come back.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. When you are in a normal state, I'm glad you asked me this question. When you are in a normal state, there must be some sensory things which you like, no, on this earth. Something.
Yes,
What?
yes, sir. Yes,
Tell
sir.
me what? Pickle, sweet,
No, sir. Sir, the
rasgulla?
way plants.
Huh?
So no. Start observing plants and their sensations. I like the most
You like.
that thing.
Right, right.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So, when you want to come back to the normal, think of flowers, plants and things and keep some around you so that you get, that is one way of doing it. Some people, uh, there used to be a sage I knew, I am not suggesting you do that, occasionally he used to smoke and now we all know that smoking is not good. This guy is occasionally smoking. So one day when he was when nobody was around, I asked him, why are you doing this smoking? Because I know you don't require this smoking. And we know that it is not good for the lungs, which you also know. I said, you also know. Why are you smoking? He said, you know what? My mind is always soaring so high. If I don't have some hold, it will go away forever. So I am holding on to this. I couldn't argue with him. I mean, there's nothing I could say. He said, this, it doesn't matter a little bit my lungs, maybe it doesn't matter. But when I smoke, I'm kind of being able to hold on to it instead of flying away forever up there. So attach yourself to something which in your daily life is attractive to you and which you like and which you love, so that when you want to come out of that state, you think of that or surround yourself with those objects. So put your hand there and then you're back.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay. What is the next question?
Yes. Sir, thank you so much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Guru. The question is that when I deeply observe in meditations, I usually forget that my gender or my physical aspects.
Okay. Good. That's good.
Is it okay to not to have awareness of physical who I am and
Absolutely. Absolutely. You are on the right direction. Because as long as when you come back, you are still aware, right? That you are a different being, then it is okay.
Right.
No harm. Actually, it's a good. People find it difficult to forget this and go. And if you can already do that, that means my belief in the understanding that the future generations are going to be better in this than just some generations before is kind of gets more credibility. I think so. I think the newer generation can approach this in a better way. So there is no harm. If you forget everything, just you will come back anyway. Don't worry about that. If you have some work to do, if you have your still life to lead in this world, you will come back. You need not worry about that. So forget the fear of not coming back and go in as much as you can.
Yeah. So, Professor Jyoti is the one who's holding me back.
Please don't hold
Thanks
him
a
back.
lot.
Please let him.
Because he keeps me grounded. Thanks a lot.
That's
And
good
the
to.
second,
It's good to have a friend like that. Okay.
and the second question is a quick question, Guru. So when I'm kind of breathing with whatever the meditation, one is palm down and palm up. So while I'm palm down is like belly breathing, and chest breathing is when palm up. That
Yes.
is what happening. Subtle I could observe all
Okay.
these things.
Okay.
So which one do you think is kind of a better?
You can do both. But palm up is the usual thing that we do.
Yeah, then the upper chest was not too much belly.
Yes, yes. This is better. I would even suggest that you put your index finger and your thumb together in the chin mudra and sit.
Yeah, that conserves energy too.
Yes, it makes the circuit again.
Yeah, complete circuit. Thank you, Guru.
Thank you.
I have read in Bhagavad Gita that we are pure consciousness. And but we are covered, means we are bounded to this material world.
Yes.
So I want to ask why we are bounded to this material world? How from a state of pure consciousness we have come to this material world, material state?
Look, neither I have an answer to this nor anybody has an answer to this. I have been looking at this explanation for many years. I have not found, but it so happens that we are bound. This is a fact. And those who have escaped from the bonds have always found that they are freed into consciousness. We don't know why or how or when it began, but the fact remains that it is so. Like we don't know when gravity began and for what reason it began, but it is there. So we have to obey the laws of gravity to be able to work on it in the same way. Also, those who have touched the ultimate consciousness, which is what we are, as you said that you read in the Gita and which is the experience of many rishis, having gone there, they have also become silent. They cannot say why it then became this limited consciousness that we experience, but it's a fact that we can unbind ourselves and go back to the essence of our true being. This can happen. When that happens, perhaps only we will know the answer, and even if you know the answer, you may not be able to relate it to somebody who has not touched that. Okay. Having said that, the question you are asking is a limited mind trying to understand that which is unlimited. The answer can be found only when the mind is free of limitations. Otherwise, we cannot find a theoretical answer for it. It's like a child, a baby, asking its parents, "Hey, Mama, Papa, you love us, no, very much. Yes, we love you very much. Really? Yes. Then why didn't you invite us for your marriage? Neither can we deny the love, nor can we invite this child for our marriage, because when this child is born after marriage, it's not there before marriage. But the fact is that the child is there and we are the parents. I don't know. I hope you get what I am trying to say. This is a metaphysical fact which cannot be put into physical terms. But when boundaries are removed and we are free, we understand the fact that that is the source. That much we know. And if I am the source, then you are also the source. Why it got modified? According to Shankara and the great teachings of Advaita Vedanta, the modification never happened. That's what we think. The modification, according to Shankara, is like mistaking a rope in the dark for a snake. The snake didn't exist in the first place, only the rope existed, but there is this thing called the illusionary aspect of Prakriti, which makes you think that it is a snake when there is no snake. When you realize that it is not a snake but a rope, the snake doesn't exist anymore in the same way. Similar to, people have only given different examples to talk about that which cannot be talked about, but at least to make one understand in ordinary limited brain what it could be. But the fact remains that we are in essence that supreme consciousness. That is a fact.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Now, sir, shall we wind up for this session? And
Thank you so much.
not at all. So, all these things we discussed, we need to again get back to that in some way and try to find out ways and means by which it could be understandable to what we call scientific minds. Except that the definition of science should be slightly modified from what it is today, that science is only to do with physical objects, which needs to be looked at carefully.
That will be very nice.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
all
sir.
of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.